Hi guys, welcome to today's video. In today's video, we're continuing our alternate future of North America series. As we know in the last episode, the Northern Pact went to war with Quebec, and Quebec has fallen. And they annexed lands from them, but now for today's video, and let's get into it. With a Texan Revolt breaking out. And, well, you might think, well, that's not much. Well, it is actually. And well, the Texan rebels. With them rising up across Texan areas and occupied areas. And well, these forces quickly connect. And they quickly push back. This is leading to the end of the Confederate States, as Texas now has power. Although they did lose a lot of their territories to California, with a march towards Louisiana breaking out. And well, they don't do very well. But at this point, we see Virginian rebels. The Virginian rebels quickly rising up. And they move in and take over DC, meaning they will never become the US now. And well, Texas moves north. At this point, they manage to take New Orleans and Louisiana in the Mississippi, the mouth of the Mississippi, meaning they have a lot of power over shipping through it, as they get pushed back in the north, but that's not a key area. As they continue their advances. At this point, the three sides decide to meet for peace. The Confederate States lost. Virginia took with it a bit of North Carolina, parts of West Virginia, and Maryland and Delaware. With parts of, I believe, Kansas going to them, all of Oklahoma, parts of Louisiana and Arkansas going to the Texan rebels. And while at this point we see that Illinois decides to annex Chicago. Which, yes, this is technically a conflict. Just to show how long it takes to take over. And well, they come in on multiple fronts. They come in this direction. Then they launch an offensive down the coast on both sides. And they launch an offensive here, taking over this part as they move in. And at this point, it agrees to the annexation, with Illinois taking back its former territory. And well, let's now head to California, where unrest starts rising up. And while this starts getting bad with a communist revolt in the south and north, with ones there, with them thinking they would quickly be put out, this ends up not true, and they fail to push them back. And the one in the north quickly takes over a big chunk of the coast, and they start moving inland. At this point, it's become clear that the California Civil War has begun. And well, they managed to push this group to the north, and this group in, with these forces mainly advancing along the coast and inland a bit. And at this point, a rise of fascist forces in the inner areas of California, including over here, and well, over here. Quickly, this group links up with the northern group, and well, as we can see, the fascist forces started having a good time. But they end up getting cut off the two sides, and this part gets pushed back, and they get pushed back to this direction. That doesn't stop them from expanding north till they end up unable to advance into the south. And then they advance here, taking over these areas. And at this point, the Cascadian Revolt breaks out. And yes, this is going to be the hardest one to deal with, as they quickly take over Vancouver Island, Vancouver, Seattle, and a few other areas. And they quickly advance forwards, with them getting pushed back a little bit in the south. But with this, they advance south, yes, to the south, and a bit to the north along the coast. And at this point, we see rebels, Mexican rebels, wanting to rejoin Mexico in the south. And there's a lot of them. One over here in northern Baja California, southern, or Baja California Sur, I guess, is the region. And quickly along the border, a few rise out. And yes, California now has rebels in some of their territories they'd taken earlier. With them managing to take over Baja California and most of Sonora, most of it, and other parts of Mexico. With at this point, one of the places that get themselves involved is the Western Union. And we're going to paint them red just because. Okay. No, I know the best color to use. Yes, yellow. As they intervene, and you may say, why are they intervening against them? Well, there's one reason. To send what they call peace forces in, peacemaking. And they basically just occupy these lands. And nothing happens. And then Mexico intervenes a bit. And basically, they help the rebels. And at this point, the Californian Civil War has officially begun. And Mexican forces quickly make a corridor to get here, with them being well strengthened. And while Cascadian forces move up north and advance towards the border with the Western Union, with forces here from the California Republic having to withdraw a bit. Of California's government being somewhere. With the coast being completely taken over by the communists, who advanced south a bit. And well, another area breaks out in fascist rebels. This is along this area, and it declares its allegiance to the fascists. And well, at this point, an offensive is made to kick these forces out, with the Californian Republic pushing them back, as they aren't a fan of fascism. They managed to push the fascists back quite significantly, with the Cascadian National Forces pushing down against the Red Forces, hoping to gain all of their lands, as they might be able to. With communist rebels continuing their advances against the Californian Republic. And they push them back and they conquer more of the coast. Basically conquering most of what would be California proper. And while the fascist rebels down in the south, the area that declared its allegiance, ends up collapsing. And then they decide to collapse the other group of forces. With them now going after the communist forces, they manage in the north to push them to the coast, which is good news for the Californian Republic. And well, the communist forces quickly gain grounds. And they even decide to go try to push out Mexican rebels. with them advancing against them, taking over Baja California and Baja California Sur, and moving into Sonora. But California's forces start pushing them back. And they push down into here, and the Mexican rebels struggle to take it back over. They push back here, with communist rebels in the Baja Peninsula leaving by boats to help hold the rest of the front. But unfortunately for the communists, this does nothing. And well, their forces start falling rapidly. And at this point, the fall of the communist forces happens. And at this point, they go after Mexican rebels, with the Mexican intervention being a failure, and they withdraw all of their, help to avoid conflict with California, knowing if one did break out, they would definitely lose. And these lands became occupied by them, with them agreeing to leave under one circumstance: they don't get invaded. So this is where the fall of the Mexican rebels happened. And against Cascadian forces, they try the same thing to defeat them. But the problem is they have the most will to fight. With Cascadia not going to look like Cascadia, with them struggling to hold to the south, but they manage to hold it eventually. And then along here, they start falling back. But they manage to stabilize the front. And at this point, California decides to go to, allow Cascadia to declare independence. Access to the Pacific Ocean, along with Cascadian Republic existing now, although California wants to invade them and take them back over as soon as possible, whereas there's Texas who's planning an invasion, maybe. And that's all for today's video. Please like and subscribe. Why should you subscribe? So we can get to 3,500 subscribers by September 30th. That's all for today's video. Wild Mapper out, and I'll note you subscribe. Bye, guys.